It happened on a Tuesday evening, during what should have been an ordinary family dinner. The windows were open, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of my rosemary chicken into the dining room. My son Michael was talking about work, while his wife Jessica scrolled through her phone under the table. Their two children, my grandchildren, were bickering over the last dinner roll. "We need to talk about Grandma's situation," Jessica said suddenly, not even looking up from her phone. "This arrangement isn't working anymore." The table went quiet. Michael looked uncomfortable. The children stopped mid-squabble. "My situation?" I asked, my fork pausing halfway to my mouth. Jessica finally looked up. "Mom, we love having you here, but it's been 8 months since Dad passed. You're becoming—" She paused, searching for the right word. "A burden to our family." A burden. The word hung in the air like smoke. In that moment, as my grandchildren's eyes widened and my son stared at his plate, I made a decision that would change all of our lives. By morning, I would be gone. After Thomas died, my world collapsed. 52 years of marriage ended with a heart attack in the garden he loved. One moment he was pruning roses, the next he was gone. The funeral passed in a blur of black clothes and casseroles. When everyone left, the silence in our home was unbearable. Michael suggested I come stay with them, just until you find your footing, Mom. I was reluctant. I'd always valued my independence, but the thought of returning to an empty house overwhelmed me. So I packed a suitcase with clothes for a few weeks, locked up our little bungalow, and moved into Michael and Jessica's guest room. It was supposed to be temporary, just until the fog of grief lifted enough for me to function on my own again. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I found comfort in making breakfast for the children, tending the small vegetable garden in their backyard, being surrounded by family instead of memories. Jessica was welcoming at first, or at least polite. She worked long hours at her law firm and seemed grateful for the extra help with the children, 11-year-old Lily and 8-year-old James. I drove them to activities, helped with homework, had dinner ready when everyone came home, but small tensions began to surface. Jessica rearranged the kitchen after I cooked. She enrolled the children in after-school programs without telling me. She made comments about "when you move back home" that became more frequent, less subtle. Michael noticed nothing or pretended not to. When I tried to talk to him about finding my own place, he'd say, "Don't be silly, Mom. The kids love having you here." But he never said that he wanted me to stay. I had my retirement checks and Thomas's life insurance. I could afford a small apartment, yet something kept me from taking that step. Fear, perhaps, or the lingering shock of becoming a widow after spending my entire adult life as a wife. So I stayed, trying to make myself useful, trying not to take up too much space in their lives. Until that Tuesday evening, when Jessica finally said what she'd been thinking for months, a burden. That's what I'd become to them. The night after Jessica's comment, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, I could hear them arguing in their bedroom. "You need to talk to your mother," Jessica was saying, her voice sharp, even when hushed. "This was never meant to be permanent." "She's still grieving," Michael responded. "Where's she supposed to go? Back to her own house? Into a retirement community? I don't know, Michael, but we need our lives back." I pressed my hands against my ears, not wanting to hear more, but their words had already reached me. Was Jessica right? Had I overstayed my welcome, become dependent, failed to move forward with my life after Thomas? The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. Made pancakes for the children, kissed them goodbye as they left for school, avoided Jessica's eyes as she rushed out with her briefcase. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't wanted here. Perhaps I wasn't needed anywhere. That afternoon, while the house was empty, I called my old neighbor Helen to check on the bungalow. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table and made a list of my options. Return to the bungalow, full of memories and emptiness. Find an apartment nearby. Look into those retirement communities Jessica had mentioned. Or do something entirely different. Before Thomas died, we'd talked about traveling. "Once I retire," he always said, "we'll see all those places we've only read about." But retirement came with a diagnosis, and travel plans were replaced by doctor visits. I was flipping through a magazine when I saw it, an advertisement for a coastal town in Oregon. Peaceful seaside living, it promised. Thomas and I had honeymooned on the Pacific coast. We'd always talked about going back someday. When Michael came home that evening, I tried to broach the subject of moving out. "I've been thinking it might be time for me to find my own place," I began. He looked startled. "Is this about what Jessica said?" "Mom, she was just stressed from work. She didn't mean it." "Maybe not," I said, though we both knew better. "But she's not wrong. This arrangement was meant to be temporary." That night, Jessica was overly nice to me, clearly feeling guilty. She complimented my pot roast, asked about my day, even suggested we go shopping that weekend. Her sudden attention felt worse than her coldness, pity wrapped in politeness. After dinner, I helped Lily with her history project. As I cut construction paper for a poster, she looked up at me. "Are you going to leave, Grandma?" she asked quietly. My hands stilled. "Who said anything about leaving?" "I heard Mom and Dad talking. Mom says you need your own life and we need our space back." Out of the mouths of babes. "Sometimes grown-ups need to make changes," I said carefully, "but that doesn't change how much I love you." Later, lying in bed, I made my decision. Not out of spite or hurt, though both feelings were there, but out of a sudden, clear realization. I had spent my entire life where I was expected to be. As a daughter, a wife, a mother. Now, for the first time, I had no one's expectations to fulfill but my own. It took me 3 days to set everything in motion. I called a real estate agent about listing the bungalow. It was too full of Thomas to return to, too empty of him to bear. I researched that coastal town in Oregon, finding a small apartment for rent above a bookstore, available for a 6-month lease. I called the landlord, sent a deposit, and arranged to pick up the keys the following week. I contacted the few friends I'd kept in touch with after Thomas died, saying vague things about taking some time away. On Friday, while everyone was at work and school, I packed my belongings. Not everything, just clothes, personal items, a few photos. I wrote 3 letters, a long one to Michael, a shorter one to Jessica, and special notes for each grandchild, with my new address and phone number. I placed them on my neatly made bed. I called a cab to take me to the airport. As we pulled away from the house, I felt a complex tangle of emotions. Grief for what I was leaving, fear of the unknown, but beneath it all, a surprising sense of possibility. For the first time in my adult life, no one was waiting for me to make dinner, do laundry, be the steady center of a family. The emptiness was terrifying, but also liberating. My flight landed in Oregon as a light rain was falling. The cab driver who took me to my new apartment was chatty, pointing out local landmarks. "New to town?" he asked. "Very new," I replied. "Visiting family?" I smiled, looking out at the misty coastline. "No, starting over." The apartment above the bookstore was smaller than the guest room I'd left behind, but it had a small balcony overlooking the water and came partially furnished. The bookstore owner, Elaine, lived next door and helped me get settled. "Not many people start fresh at our age," she commented as she showed me how the tricky shower knob worked. "Takes courage." I wasn't sure if what I'd done was courageous or cowardly. I hadn't given Michael a chance to talk me out of leaving. I hadn't confronted Jessica about her comment. I'd simply disappeared. The first call came the next day, Michael's number flashing on my phone. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for the conversation. His message was frantic. "Mom, where are you? Are you okay? Please call me back immediately." I texted him instead. "I'm safe. I need some time. Please respect that." More calls followed, from Michael, from Jessica, even from Helen back home. I responded only with brief texts, assuring everyone I was safe, but firm about needing space. After a few days, the calls became less frequent. I spent that first month walking along the shore, browsing in the bookstore downstairs, and sitting on my balcony watching the ocean. I spoke to Michael once a week, brief conversations where he tried to convince me to come back, and I gently refused. "Mom, you don't have to move across the country just because of what Jessica said," he insisted. "This isn't about Jessica," I told him, partly lying. It's about me figuring out who I am now that your father is gone, now that you're grown. I've never had the chance to just be Martha. Slowly, I built a life in my new town. I volunteered at the local library, joined a walking group, took a pottery class. I made acquaintances, then friends. I learned to eat in restaurants alone without feeling self-conscious, to go to movies by myself, to enjoy my own company. 3 months after I left, Jessica called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Martha," she said, her voice hesitant, "I owe you an apology." I waited, saying nothing. What I said that night, calling you a burden, it was cruel and untrue. I was stressed about work and taking it out on you. I never meant for you to leave like that. I didn't leave because of what you said, I told her, the lie now feeling more like truth. I left because it was time for me to build my own life again. 6 months turned into a year. My lease ran out and I signed another. The bungalow sold, giving me financial security. Michael, Jessica, and the children came to visit that summer, an awkward, tender reunion. We walked on the beach, ate seafood, talked about everything except the night I decided to leave. On their last evening, Jessica found me on the balcony, watching the sunset. "You seem happy here," she said, leaning against the railing beside me. "I am," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. "I never thought—" She hesitated. "I never imagined you having a life like this, independent, social. I only saw you as Michael's mother, the children's grandmother." "That's all I saw myself as, too," I admitted, until I had no choice but to see more. We watched the sky turn from orange to purple in comfortable silence. "Thank you," she said finally, "for showing the children that it's never too late to start again." After they left, I felt the familiar ache of missing family, but it was different now, a gentle tide rather than a drowning wave. I had built something here, something that was mine alone. Sometimes the most painful words can push us toward our truest path. Jessica called me a burden, and in running from that label, I found an unexpected freedom. Not the freedom of youth, with its endless horizons, but the richer freedom of age, knowing who I am, what I want, and having the courage to reach for it, even when it means leaving the familiar behind. In trying to disappear, I finally found myself.